You're listening to a highlight from the Yishai Fleischer Show on Voice of Israel.
Emmanuel Navon is the director of the Political Science and Communications Department at the Jerusalem Orthodox College. He's also a senior fellow at the Kohelet Policy Forum, teaches international relations at Tel Aviv University and at the IDC in Herzliya, and is a news analyst and commentator, often featured on I-24. And he's in studio right now. Emmanuel, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And congratulations on your new book, which is called The Victory of Zionism, Reclaiming the Narrative About Israel's Domestic, Regional, and International Challenges. The title, of course, is there to challenge Peter Beinart's title, which is The Crisis of Zionism. Tell me a little bit about the book.
That's right. Well, as you said, the title echoes Peter Beinart's The Crisis of Zionism. And what I'm trying to do is really to challenge what has become the accepted narrative about Israel. Accepted by many Jews, liberal Jews in America, and expressed by Peter Beinart, which is that if we do not establish a so-called Palestinian state immediately, then Israel has no future. And I claim the very opposite. I challenge the accepted narrative about Israel's domestic challenges. Generally, it is accepted that these people say that if we don't establish a Palestinian state, we will not have a democratic and a Jewish state. I disagree with that. Generally, people say also that we will not have peace with our neighbor in the Middle East if we do not establish a Palestinian state. And finally, internationally, if we do not establish a Palestinian state, we'll be in trouble with the United States, with the international community. Basically, as you see it, the source of all our troubles, domestically, regionally, and internationally, is the lack of a Palestinian state, and I challenge this theory.
Okay, so let's get to it. These theories all have one thing in common, which is fear, right? You will suffer either physical pain, the physical pain of terrorism, of endless cycle of violence, or you will suffer international condemnation and be basically ostracized from the international community. Or thirdly, you will become an apartheid state. These are, I call them the tripartite apartheid fears. This is the three kind of scare tactics that are out there. Well, how do you answer those scare tactics? Some people, I don't agree with the folks that say this is what the world believes. I think that there's a lot more people in the world than who the world is purported to be. But this is a fear that you hear even amongst Jews, all three.
Yeah, well, I think the best way to answer it is just by looking at facts. And facts say the very opposite. First of all, when it comes, of course, to the future of Israeli democracy and to the whole issue of demographics, as we know, the whole narrative about demographics and about the danger of Israel becoming a binational and apartheid state is based on the false data published by the Palestinian Authority in 1997. Now, these data have been audited and have been proven to be wrong. So first of all, as you know, Israel pulled out from the Gaza Strip in 2005, and now, today, in between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, there is a two-third Jewish majority, and this majority is not only stable but also growing, because there has been a decline in Arab birth rates in the past 20 years and an increase in Jewish birth rates in the past 2 decades. I'm not saying that we should annex Judea and Samaria tomorrow morning, but it is a feasible option in the long run, definitely. And therefore, the whole idea that if we don't establish a Palestinian state, there's going to be an Arab majority is simply wrong.
Okay, so let's just. I want to get into these issues without kind of mincing words. Everybody would say, okay, you want to annex or assert Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. Does that mean that you give full democratic rights to Arabs there, in your opinion?
Yes, eventually. We don't have to do it tomorrow morning. What I'm saying is that for the past 20 years, demographic trends have been in Israel's favor. So we don't need to panic, but we don't need to worry either. We don't need to panic meaning that the time is on Israel's side. The fact that time is on Israel's side doesn't mean that we have to implement our sovereignty in 2 months or in 4 months. We have to look into the exact figures and figure out when is the good time to do it. There's also something else. Many times, many people in Israel, on the left at least, always talk about providing financial incentives for Jews to leave Judea and Samaria. Now, this is considered completely acceptable, politically correct, but when you suggest the very same idea for the Arab residents of Judea and Samaria, you're considered insane and racist. In other words, Israel can also have an impact and an influence on those demographic trends, and this is what I say when I'm saying we do not need to annex tomorrow morning. I think that we need to maintain a strong Jewish majority. 2/3 might not be enough, but eventually it might turn into 80%, as we have today within pre-67 Israel.
There's a wave of new laws, ones that want to not allow the government to be able to give away terrorists, to trade terrorists. One that wants to give an override to the Supreme Court's override. We need to say to bring laws back into the Knesset after they've been overridden by the Supreme Court. There's now a new law that wants to talk about Israel as the Jewish state. It's the kind of Jewish national, Israel as the Jewish national home. And that law is making tremendous waves. Tzipi Livni and Vogue coming out against it by all kinds of alternative policy forums, writing just in first sentences in their position papers, this is an evil law, bad law, destructive law. And on the other side, people are saying, what is this law supposed to be? What is this Israel's the Jewish national home? I thought that's what the Declaration of Independence actually has it kind of written in stone, that Israel is supposed to be the home of the Jewish people and supposed to follow Jewish national principles and characteristics. And you, along with the fact that you are the director of political science and communications department at the Jerusalem Orthodox College, you're also senior fellow at the Kohelet Policy Forum, which is behind this, what we call Chok HaLeom. Right. How do we translate that in English? What are you guys calling it in
English? The nationality law. So the question is, why do we need that law? You mentioned the Declaration of Independence. It says in Israel's Declaration of Independence, we hereby declare the establishment of a Jewish state in the land of Israel that will be known as the State of Israel.
Right.
Now, if it's already said, why do we need a law to repeat it? Well, the answer is that in 1948, right after the Declaration of Independence, Israel's High Court of Justice was petitioned, and it ruled that the Declaration of Independence has no constitutional value.
Wow.
It is only a declaration, and therefore it has no legal or constitutional value. And since Israel does not have a constitution, Israel is actually not legally and constitutionally defined as a Jewish state. So de facto, we are a Jewish country with Jewish symbols and with laws and practices that take care of the Jewish people. In other words, the fact that we have the law of return that allows any Jew to become a citizen of Israel, or the fact that the IDF sent its soldiers to rescue Jews in Entebbe in 1976, all these things show that we are de facto a Jewish state, but not de jure. Now, why is that a problem? Well, it is a problem because for the past 20 years, we have had in Israel what former Justice Aaron Barak called the constitutional revolution. What is the constitutional revolution? As you know, the left lost its power with the elections of 1977. And since then, it has been trying to keep its power through the judicial system. Now, this is not a conspiracy theory. It was explained very clearly by Professor Menachem Motner from Tel Aviv University. He even wrote a book about it to explain how the left, to which he belongs, maintained its power in the judicial system after losing it at the polls. How did Barak do that? Well, first of all, he cancelled the principle of standing. Today, to petition the High Court of Justice, you do not have to prove that you would be affected by a government decision or by a law against which you're appealing. So anybody now can go to the High Court of Justice.
Let me just explain it very quickly. That means that basically the High Court, not only can anybody go to the High Court can basically take any case. The United States, you have a law of standing where basically you have to have a case or controversy. You have to be personally affected by a problem, and then you could get redress from the courts. Not only that, the Supreme Court in the United States cannot hear cases but dealing with constitutional issues. Here in Israel, oftentimes the court will say, let me deal with this issue now. Nobody's been hurt, and I feel like talking and thinking about this, and I feel like passing super legislation on it, but basically they have no limitations, our Supreme Court.
Right. So, and this was established by Barak. Basically, Barak canceled the principle of standing. You do not have to prove that you would be affected, that it concerns you directly in order to go to court. Then, he also decided that anything is it can be ruled by the court. Any government justiciable, exactly. For example, as opposed to what was in the past. In the past, for example, in 1969, there was a petition to the High Court of Justice of somebody who said, I don't agree with the fact that the German government is sending a new ambassador to Israel who was an officer in the Wehrmacht. And the High Court said, well, that's very nice, but it has nothing to do with me. It's a government decision. It was approved by the Knesset. I have no authority to rule about it. Barak said, no, now we can rule about anything. Anything can be cancelled by the court. Any government decision, any even Knesset law, that's also new. Barak decided that a law can be also repealed, cancelled by the court. It was not the case in the past.
Wow.
Now, what do you do if, in order to cancel a government decision or a law, it has to be proved illegal? But Barak said, oh, no, not only illegal, also if it's unreasonable. What's unreasonable? Well, let the court decide. Anything that you think is unreasonable, the court can cancel a government decision.
Tremendous power.
Tremendous power. So now anybody can go to the court and say, Your Honor, I think this government decision is unreasonable, right? And the judge says, yes, absolutely. So instead of a separation of power in Israel, we have a hierarchy of power where the court has the end word on anything. And this new structure has been used and exploited for the past 20 years by radical left-wing anti-Israel, anti-Zionistic organizations paid by the European Union to cancel government decisions and laws that protect the Jewish identity of the state. I'll give you two examples. In 2000, the Kadan case, the court said that the Jewish agency cannot invest and buy lands only for Jews, even though that is what this
the very mandate of it was.
Right, exactly. So now, even though in 1989 the court ruled that in Bedouin towns, only Bedouins are allowed to buy, and not Jews. Jews are not allowed in Israel, according to the court, to buy land in a Bedouin town. But an Arab is allowed to buy land in a Jewish town. So this is actually, there's anti-Jewish discrimination that was decided by the court in those two decisions. And then, in 2006 and 2012, the court was petitioned by organizations that want to, what they call unify families. So this is a euphemism in order to implement what the Palestinians call the right of return with fictitious weddings between Arabs from Judea and Samaria and Arabs from Israel. And what they're trying to do is to impose on Israel by the back door the so-called right of return to turn Israel into an Arab country. Now, this is what the Barak Revolution, constitutional revolution, has enabled those people to do, and we have to stop that. Because today the court does not have any law that enables it to reject those petitions, and therefore Israel, as I said, is not a Jewish country de jure, and this is being used by those radical organizations that are financed by the European Union and the European governments in order to challenge Israel's Jewish identity, and that is why we need that law.
What does the law say?
The law is saying that, yes, Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people. So, for example, today, the fact that today, you know that the Israeli government gives money for Jewish education in America, for example. Now, today, according to the principle of the Barak Revolution, you can go to court and say, excuse me, but why is my tax money going, I'm an Arab, or I'm an anti-Zionist Haredi, ultra-Orthodox, and why should my tax money go to finance Jewish education in North America? And today the judge can say, you're right, this is anti-constitutional, or it's, even though we don't have a constitution, or it's illegal, or it's unreasonable. And so the law says, yes, the state of Israel is financing Jewish education overseas, for example, or has to give automatic citizenship to Jews who want to become citizens, because today you can you can go to the court and say, why does the state give automatic citizenship to Jews and not to Arabs?
Dr. Emmanuel Navon, what are the chances of this law that will solidify Israel as the Jewish state passing? It does have the support so far of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and it's a kind of strange and ironic revolution that it wants to bring about. Something that you thought and you understood was always kind of natural and obvious. It turns out, according to what you're analyzing, that it's not so obvious at all. What are the chances of the Jewish state actually being the state of the Jewish people?
Well, we'll know on Sunday, but what is clear is that, the Bible of the Israeli left, the Haaretz newspaper, is against that law for obvious reasons. And politicians like Tzipi Livni, who are so concerned about how Haaretz is going to rate their IQ, and since Haaretz is saying...
Is going to what?
To rate their IQ, because this is really why people like Tzipi Livni, how they think, is how Haaretz is going to rate my IQ. So if Haaretz says, if you're going to support this law, we're going to rate your IQ as negative, we're going to say you're stupid in a newspaper, so they get completely petrified, and they say they're against the law. That's how they function. And since Haaretz has been campaigning against that law, so Tzipi Livni said she's against it. Now, it's really ironical that defining Israel as the nation-state of the Jewish people, which is the basic and founding principle of Zionism, is considered today a controversy with major politicians in Israel, mainstream politicians saying, well, that might be a problem, actually. It just goes to show where we've got, where we've gotten today. I mean, 10 years ago, it was a non-issue. As a matter of fact, even 4 years ago in the previous Knesset, this law was supported by MKs from Kadima, from the Labour Party. But today, they're all intimidated by Haaretz. They decided to say, no, that law is not good, you can't vote for it, and therefore it's a radical right-wing law, and it's against democracy. And they all say, okay, well, if Haaretz said it, then we have to be against it.
Dr. Emmanuel Navon is the Director of Political Science and Communications Department at the Jerusalem Orthodox College and also Senior Fellow at the Kohelet Policy Forum. He teaches International Relations at Tel Aviv U and also at the IDC in Herzliya and is a regular guest on I-24. And we thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
All right.